deep personal sadness for me. An intense feeling of sadness I know is shared by all our Malacañang co-workers. For our friends and colleagues who fell in the line of duty for country and compatriot. The depth of the grief we share tonight is so much. Over the passage onward of Malu Frostrom, of Kaloy Clet and his aide, Demi Reyno, of Pearlie, of Joe, of Major Sakatani and Captain Aligata, or Sergeant Perez, who boarded that final flight of Bell 412 last Tuesday afternoon to prepare for our inspection of the Halsima Highway construction. Malu Frostrom, as you all know, was one of the closest co-workers of mine. And she was the perfect co-worker. She was one of the most, if not the most competent of the people I have ever worked with in all my life, and one of the most trustworthy and loyal. And as you have heard from the others, and as many of you know her, while her 24/7 work ethic matched mine, her sunshine personality was the perfect foil for my quick temper. So we got along famously. Kaloy Clet, you have heard from June Esperon how he came into our lives. Operations officer. And even when June went on to other stages of his own career, Kaloy stayed with us. And from Del Bangit's time, we were already discussing how we would ripen him to be the future PSG chief when he was old enough. But as Providence would have it, he had his most shining moments in the equally prestigious and maybe even more glamorous job of being my senior aide or senior military assistant. After all, I remember in the time of my father, President Diosdado Macapagal, PSG was not yet a group, it was a battalion. And General Dizon was his senior aide, senior military assistant, the job that Kaloy held. And he was the most glamorous officer in Malacañang and one of the most in the armed forces. And that is my vision of an SMA. But aside from just looking good next to me, I gave him an assignment that other senior aides before him did not do, to alternate with Malu in doing advance work for my provincial engagements. And that was what he was doing. Advance work for our trip to make sure that Halsima Highway, with all its right-of-way problems and delays in the past that caused reorganization after reorganization, will be finished by December. Earlier tonight, when I was walking among the friends who are here to provide the sympathy, I came across Ching Montinola. And she told me that Kaloy was one of her co-designers of the Malacañang Golf Clubhouse. And she said he had excellent taste. And indeed, that I guess goes with the glamour of being an SMA, and that convinced me even more how right he was for the job. Kaloy was made SMA when he was still full colonel. It's an 07, you call it General 07 position, but he was still full colonel. And one time his wife Josie came to see me with a common friend in Malacañang. And our common friend opened up the subject about why Kaloy had not yet been made general. And I said, well, because we're waiting for the class 79 to get promoted to general. And then I would suppose, because he's got this position, he's going to be the first of the class 80 to be general. I said, no, there's already a general, General Segovia. So I think I called Gilbert. I said, Gilbert, I thought that Kaloy would be the first general of his class. So there's already one, so it's about time. And that's why, as June said, he was one of the first 3 of his class to become general. And no sooner, because at least we are saying our goodbye and giving our respects to a wonderful Brigadier General Kaloy Clet. Joe Cap was one of my media supporters from way back. I was still a senator. And his wife Maret and his sister Celia were my colleagues in the Department of Social Welfare and Development. And now Maret is a colleague today in the office of the President. Joe is a loss, not only to Maret and to Celia and to their children, but I believe also to the Malacañang press corps, who are grieving very much from him, as I can perceive, and other members of media with whom he was when he was in media and with whom he dealt in his job as Undersecretary of the Press in my administration, because I could observe that he had great camaraderie with them. Pearlie was Malu's tireless and uncomplaining deputy, though she was doing obsolete work even before Malu began to handle my appointments. I remember her in 2004 making sure that she would make that separate line between doing work for the president and not making it work for the candidate. And I remember my birthday last Sunday. Pearlie had a big smile, and she kissed me happy birthday. And I said, and she said, thank you, Mom, for the trust. I also thank you, Pearlie, for your devotion. The 2 pilots, June Esperon has told you how good they were. Competent, veteran flyers. And I must say from my experience, conservative pilots. They would recommend not to take off if the weather was bad. They would recommend to turn back if the weather turned bad. So I know that on that fateful afternoon, they did what they believed was right. They did their best. And if the Lord took them and the others, it is because, as one of my best friends once told me, all of us have to die sooner or later. We are not immortal. It's not for us to choose, because God knows when it is the best time for each one of us to go. And that is the biggest comfort I can ever have when loved ones die, and the biggest comfort I can pass on to those who are grieving, the members of the family. Sergeant Perez, the crew, that was the silent presence, the quiet, reliable presence, who would open and close the door of the helicopter for me. You know, when the plane was first found, there were only 3 bodies, and we prayed that the 5 survived and were wandering somewhere in the forest. Then it was 5, and we prayed for the 3. Then it was 7. And the first news was that it was Sergeant Perez who was not found. And knowing that he was right next to the door, I was hoping that he had survived like Nestor Mata survived the crash of President Magsaysay. But it turns out that he was indeed one of the first 7. And again, each one of us dies sooner or later. The Lord knows which time is best for each of us. Demi Reyno, Kaloy Clet's aide, was the youthful mother of a 9-year-old baby, a 9-month-old baby. Her husband, the new single parent, is also in PSG. So I asked the PSG family to help him raise her baby. This is when I found out that she had a 9-year-old, a 9-month-old. I remember the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Now it will take a village to raise her baby, the Malacañang Park Barangay. Let us long remember them, all of them, for their high sense of public duty and their quiet odes to joy under a most challenging work environment. They have gone past Earth's mortal bounds, but I have faith that they are now in their place in heaven. We send them off with our prayers and remembrance. To all my colleagues, maraming salamat.